And we've got some really important guests this evening. So I'm going to ask each of them to give us a 1 minute of who they are, starting with Dr. Hanan Bushkin. Hanan, who are you and why are you on this webinar this evening?
Thank you, Awi. I think this is an incredibly important webinar. We're seeing a string of helpless, hopeless individuals that are taking, unfortunately, the route of suicide in our community. I'm a psychologist in private practice. I head the anxiety and trauma clinic, and I've had the privilege to serve the community and individuals that are struggling with mental health disorders, mental health issues. And I hope that I can impart and add some value to the ones that are listening and the ones that are going to watch us back later on.
Tova Goldstein, tell us exactly who you are.
Thank you so much for having me, Howard. My name is Tova. I'm a therapist in private practice, and I'm also the co-director of The Key, which is an organization that offers affordable therapy to the Jewish community.
Okay, tell us that again. The Key, where do we find you?
So The Key is an organization that we started 2 years ago when we saw a need in the Jewish community for more affordable therapy. We've got 30 of our top therapists on our books. To date, we've seen over 300 clients. We've got about 160 active clients at the moment. And you can visit our website. It's www.thekey.co.za. And you can get our contact information there. We'd love to help.
Thanks. Brenda, give us a few seconds of who you are.
And Howard, thank you too for inviting me onto this forum at a very, very difficult time in our community life. I'm, as is Hanan, in private practice, have been for over 30 years. I work as a supervisor, oversight person at the Chev. I also sit on the board at the Chev. And our concern, as you can imagine, we have a huge community that we try and service. And our concern is that of late, there have been a spate of very sad and tragic events of people taking their own lives, people living with huge dilemmas and desperate situations in their lives, which we see consistently through every day. And that is the context, really, that I think brings us all together. And I wanted to really thank the Jewish Report for creating a context in which to bring some voices to this, to try and understand it a little more deeply, and perhaps to let people know that there is a place, not just simply to be, we often say to people, speak to somebody. I'd like to change that a little and to suggest, find a place where you can be heard. We need to have places to be heard, and all the people that you speak to who are on this forum and the people that are waiting, whether it's at the Keys, at the Chev, in private practice, create safe places for people to be heard. And it's heard not just in terms of what we think, but what we feel. And right now, people are feeling overwhelmed, desperate, anguished, trapped. And often at times like that, when reason no longer prevails, suicide seems like a way out. And I think we're seeing that it's both local as well as global.
So, Nick, we're going to come back to you in a second. So if you want to, you can even turn off your camera. We'll come back to you in probably 20 minutes, half an hour. But Hanan, I want to speak almost to you first, because Brenda says we're almost seeing an explosion of mental health issues at the moment. Is this new? Is this unique? Is this the hangover from COVID? Are we seeing an increase in people struggling at the moment?
So the short answer is yes. We are seeing an increase in mental health or ill health. Depression is on the rise. Anxiety, all anxiety disorders are on the rise. People are feeling more helpless, more hopeless. You don't have to guess, just turn on the news and see what we're getting, not just in this country, but obviously in Israel and worldwide. People are feeling more helpless and don't see a solution to a very difficult problem. And never mind that, people are struggling in their own lives. Financial insecurity, lack of purpose, family dynamics and family conflicts, Marriages are struggling more than ever. Relationship between parents and kids is more of a struggle now than it's ever been before, because kids are exposed to much more robust and nuanced lives. We never had the kind of data and information that our kids are exposed to today than where we were 20, 30 years ago. So parents have to manage a lot of things, and that causes an incredible amount of stress. You know, us as individuals, we can carry only so much weight before we crumble. And once we crumble and we don't know how to deal with it, over time that becomes a sense of helplessness and hopelessness. And sometimes we do need somebody to lean on, and more importantly, somebody to help us manage and learn how to manage this load. So we've always had stress. There's no question about it. We always look back at 20 years and 30 years and 40 years ago, and we think that those times were easier, and maybe times were simpler, but they were not easier. Now it's just way more complicated, and we need to develop a framework, a method to learn how to deal with a very complex and nuanced world. And to answer your question, yes, it is getting progressively worse, but the other side of the coin is that there's a lot of hope. We know now more than ever about mental health. We know now more than ever about how to help somebody get from point A to point B. We have a supportive community. We have support all around us that we can tap into. So as much as there's stress and conflict and a complex life, I would say there is on the other end as much hope that we can actually tap into that will make us feel better and in control.
Hanan, talk us through, is mental health and mental illness, is it the same thing, or are these different things?
Well, you can define it in any way you want. You can slice it in any way you want, but the way I define it is, if there's something going on in your world that prevents you from getting from point A to your point B, not mine, not social media, not your mom, not your dad, not your kids, your point B, then I would consider that as an obstacle. The obstacle could be external, could be financial instability, it could be, as I said, a marriage, it could be ill health, or it could be internal. Some people are addicted to self-sabotage, and they actually have a way to get from point A to point B, but they actually stop themselves short because they're afraid of success or they're afraid of failure. So the way I would define mental ill health is when there's friction between where you are and where you want to be. And by the way, that opens up another conversation. How many of us know where we are, and how many of us know where we want to be? I'll ask 100 people, what is your goal in life? And people will give me very general answers. I want to be happy. I want to be successful. I want to be financially secure. But those are very general. And if you're going to set yourself general answers, you will never be able to achieve it. And the reason why people don't want to set specific goals is because they're afraid of the failure. They're afraid of not making it. So people would rather set very broad and general goals. So first of all, certainly know where you're coming from, certainly know your position, know your temperament, work with who you are. I always give the analogy of, the Ferrari does really, really well on the racetrack. It does horribly in the garage. You got to know your temperament. You got to know what your strengths are, and you got to know where you're going. You got to know what's your racetrack and get on a racetrack. Be with people that celebrate you, not with people that tolerate you. But certainly my number one advice would be know where you are, know where you're going. And if there's friction, maybe you should seek some help in undoing that.
Before, Tova, I ask you about whether we've lost our coping mechanisms that we've traditionally had to deal with all of the pressures and the pressure cookers that we're in at the moment. I want to also remind people that there's a Q&A part on Zoom. You can ask questions, you can do so anonymously, you can make comments in the comment section. And if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram as well, please feel free to leave a comment. Unfortunately, we can't do anonymously there as well. But in fact, Dylan will bring those questions through to our panel as well. But Tova, Hanan has mentioned our problems are different. Our lives are maybe a little more complicated than they were 20 or 30 years ago. Have people lost the coping mechanisms that maybe our parents and our grandparents had, or has just life become more difficult?
It's a great question. And I think that my answer would be no, we have it. We all have the ability to cope. We all have a natural resilience that we are born with. I don't think that some people are born with more resilience than others. And I think the fact that it's 2024 does not mean that that has changed. I just think that we forget, and we lose that narrative that allows us to believe that we are copers and that we can actually get through stuff. And I think, you know, as therapists, it's a gift that we can give to our clients when we are able to point them in the direction of their own mental health and to point them in the direction of their own resilience. And I think that, you know, despite the fact that it's 2024, the mental health discussion is still stigmatized and there is still fear around talking about it. And that is what prevents so many people from being able to access that, those coping mechanisms and the skills that they actually really do have. And I think that the more we talk about it, and that's why this is so important, the more we're able to just bring it out into the public and not be afraid to share what we are going through, the more we will realize that actually, I've got this, I can do it. Whether I can do it on my own, whether I can do it if I pull in all my resources, whether my resources are my family, my friends, my therapist, my, you know, watching YouTube videos, whatever that may be. But we definitely have the ability to cope. And I think that because life is so busy and our minds are so full of everything that we are trying to deal with and cope with on a daily basis, we forget that we have access to our intelligent psychological system all the time. We just need to be reminded that we've got it.
So Topher, we used to say during the period of COVID, it's okay to not be okay. Did we believe it? Was that kind of just a slogan we used to throw out? Do people genuinely believe that?
I personally think that the biggest mistake that we make is that our goal is to be happy all the time. And I just don't think that that is possible. I think that sometimes life is really hard. I think that we struggle. As Hanan mentioned, there are so many things that we are trying to balance and manage on a daily basis. And if our goal is to always be happy, then we really do set ourselves up to fail before we've even started playing the game. So for me, it's not about being okay. It's about, I don't have to feel okay to be okay. I can struggle and be okay at the exact same time. That is possible. You know, when I know that even though I don't feel okay right now, I'm still okay. That is actually how I achieve a little bit more peace of mind, which then enables me to access my psychological intelligence and my internal wisdom that allows me to then get the help that I need. So it's not about, you know, how do I solve all my problems and how do I achieve this kind of, you know, this happiness. When clients walk into my office, I'm like, if you're here for me to make you feel better, you know, that's not going to happen. It's about, how do I know that no matter what I'm going through, I'm still okay. I'm still okay.
Is part
even
of the
though I'm
problem
struggling.
is part of the problem social media, because we all compare ourselves to the people that we see on Facebook and Instagram, but no one ever posts a picture of themselves working a 12-hour day at work. They post their picture of themselves in a restaurant, at a birthday party, in an airplane, and we compare our lives, our mundane lives, to the brief moments of happiness in other people's lives rather than the totality of their lives. So are we being given a false picture by viewing other people's lives on social media and saying, well, my life must be full 24 hours a day with only those great moments of ecstasy and happiness?
Howard, may I comment on
Totally
that?
agree
Because
with that.
you raised a very, very significant point in that it does appear that other people are living happy lives. And linking on to something that Tova said about you can be okay without feeling okay, I think there is a danger to somehow simplify the anguish and despair that people feel. This is not just a superficial experience of I'm not having a good day, or things are not going my way, or I don't have enough money, or I'm not having a fun time, or I'm not happy. I think there is an experience of deep anguish. There are times that people hit a place where there is an experience of distorted reason. There is an experience where they cannot live with a psychic pain. The pain is overwhelming. I think there is a danger in some way to kind of suggest, well, it's a mental illness. Mental illness, by the way, is significant. People who struggle with bipolar disorder, deep clinical depression, schizophrenia. There are many people who struggle with chronic illnesses, disability, chronic pain. They're unable to function, unable to work. Besides the usual things that we are struggling with in this country, whether it's anti-Semitism, worrying about politics, worrying about water, watching, and as you say, not only social media, but watching the news, being struck so deeply that something we really believed in our whole lives, this establishment of the state of Israel, is at risk. There was a very good interview with Fania Oz-Salzberger, who is the professor emeritus for history of Haifa University, the daughter of Amos Av, and she, I beg your pardon, of Amos Oz. And her comment to Amanpour is that we are struggling with a love of Israel, which was our homeland. And we are now faced for the first time as Jews with humiliation, shame, absolute impotence in knowing what way to go forward. And so the danger is that we have to recognize that there is a wider layer of the onion that is impinging on us as human beings. And then in the middle of the onion are these layers and layers of personal distress, very much as Hanan was saying, family relationships, loss in family life, children that are struggling, financial issues. There is a plethora of things. It confluences. It isn't just one thread. There is a time where all these things come together and people feel desperate. It's a state of psychic distress that is very difficult to describe in simple phrases. And at times like that, that's the invitation we need to put out, not just speak to somebody, but please have someone hear you, hear how you are feeling locally, how are you feeling globally, how are you feeling? Men particularly struggle to be able to, men are often in our community, and it's still traditionally so, that men are seen as the breadwinners. If they are not the breadwinners and women happen to be the breadwinners, we haven't quite arrived at a post-structural place where the traditional ideas have fallen away. Men feel impotent. Their levels of success at being able to call themselves a man, and very much as you've described, they watch social media, they see how people are living, what people own. You switch on television, how $1 million yachts. Some people are struggling to pay the rent. They're struggling to pay for services. Where do they go? What do they do? Who do they speak to? There is shame, a deep sense of shame and despair in people's lives. And I think the danger is to, in some way, suggest it's transitory. Sometimes it's of a long standing. It comes from childhood abuse. It is sad to say that our community is not in any way protected from the abuse and trauma faced by society at large. Individuals, children are exposed to sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse. Women are struggling. Women do things differently to men. They might not be aggressive in their injuring of self, but we see the abuse of substances, alcohol, anorexia is an ongoing getting rid of the self. We see women smilingly walking to their death. We see people not looking after themselves. We hear men often saying, what's the doctor going to tell me? What's the psychologist going to tell me? It's not what can be told. It's what do they need to say. And we don't often have sufficient safe spaces. We're told often, we need to find joy. We need to find pockets of promise in the world. For some people, access to that is almost impossible. And we have to acknowledge that this isn't just a one idea or one thread. It is a multiplicity of threads that come together, that confluence at a particular time and lead to that person making a decision that is so provocative. It is so catastrophic. It is so tragic. The aftermath of those kinds of deaths are the ripple effects are seen for generations. It gives people an idea that this is a solution to problems. And the problems, unfortunately, we kind of say, well, it could have been, you know, the Chef particularly is now offering possibilities to people to try and pay the rent, ordinary everyday things where men feel absolutely not an ordinary failure, spectacular failures, because they're unable to keep their children at school. They're unable to pay for food. These are real phenomena, and the psychic pain that people are in, that we see, whether it's at Keys, whether we see it in our private practices, at times the weightiness is of such a nature that we cannot dismiss it as is it a mental illness. It's a confluence of many conditions that people struggle to not only make sense of, but to find their way through. They're caught in a it's hard even to describe. When people describe it, they can't find the words to say. We struggle to find the words to say. People are struggling, men particularly, with shame, a sense of humiliation, that they cannot be who they would want to be. So just what has triggered it was your comment about what do we see on social media. We see pictures of people, food. We see pictures of people on holiday, and I cannot do that. So it exacerbates the problem. But what we see in private practice, what we are seeing in organizations like Kai in private practice at the Chev, where they have hundreds and hundreds of people struggling with ordinary everyday life, finding a way just to feel okay, never mind happy, just to feel okay, just to wake up in the morning and feel I can manage this day. It's far more, it has a depth to it. When people struggle with conditions like, for instance, bipolar disorder, the side effects of the medicines themselves become a problem for people. They don't know how to manage what it is that they are forced to manage. So this problem is, and the only example I can find that would fit would be this layers of the onion. I'd like to, and I link on to both my colleagues who talk about hope. How do we find this hope? And how we find hope is in that withholding the hands of another, or having another feel, so that we feel felt, not feel understood even, but feel felt, because we are struggling on every level of human existence at the moment.
Brenda, I want to get to a word that you used in your introductory remarks, but you said that people feel trapped. And I think that for me resonated as the word more than anything else, that people feel like there aren't solutions, that they aren't capable of getting through to solutions. And Nicholas, when he tells us his story, will use a phrase, because he used it when he told me the story. He said, people look at very permanent solutions for very temporary problems. But if someone is feeling like they're trapped, that there are no alternatives, what do they do? Do they speak to friends? Do they speak to families? Do they need a professional? If you're feeling trapped, what's the right path for you to take?
Howard, I certainly appreciate. I think all my colleagues will know what that feels like when people present that trappedness. And I do have to, unfortunately, use the situation we find ourselves politically with Israel. We are taught as Jews to feel compassion, to be kind, and yet we are witnessing things that are contrary to everything that we are supposed to be. And the words of Fania Salzberger were so powerful when she says, I love Israel. I'm begging for the outrageous acts of taking our people, bring our people back. But this is also not who we are. We are shamed. We are humiliated every day, not only by what our government does, but what the world is saying. We can argue there are dreadful things in hundreds of countries. Otherwise, why is Israel being picked out? Part of it is that this is actually not who we are. So people are struggling historically. If things go bad in South Africa, and we are placed in South Africa, we always had Israel. Israel was our safe place. It was our motherland, our fatherland, a place that we could go to where we would be received and held and embraced. People are doubting that now. People are having a sense of feeling stuck. They're not able to move. What does it mean to to a father, to a mother right now, when she hears people saying, well, we are going to Australia, or we are thinking of going to Gibraltar. I have no place to go, and we can't manage here. We can't go anywhere else. And we're getting messages of hope, and we've got to find joy, and we've got to be able to sustain ourselves. We've got to have when we feel trapped, we need to be heard, not what we think. We didn't start this. We can't fix it. We can't fix the water. We can't fix the power. We can't fix global events. How do we manage the trappedness we feel in our everyday lives? And that's where it is to search out someone who will hear us, someone we will hear how we are feeling. And within that morass, people like ourselves have placed ourselves in the forefront of saying, come to us. We will try in whatever which way to make sense of what you're grappling with, one thread at a time. Our lives are a tapestry of threads, a tapestry of identities, a tapestry of threads that are interwoven. And people are finding that things aren't knitting together. And that experience of, I don't know what to do. Another aspect, somebody who recently took their own lives had committed an offense. He had defrauded his company. Where is he to go? What is he to do? The shame, the humiliation that he experiences. This isn't a bad day. This isn't and I appreciate so much that commentary of a permanent solution to a temporary problem. For some people, it isn't temporary. It has been ongoing. It is something that they have had since childhood in just different forms they have manifest. And now they come as adults, and these problems are manifest in a million different ways. So at times, people are trying, and they look for something that will just give them what I best call a sunbeam in the darkness that they can hold on to. And that's the message, if anything, that I would want to give out is, let's search for the sunbeam. Find someone who will hear you, not simply someone who you can speak to. There are people who are dedicating their whole professional lives to listening, to trying to create safe spaces. So when you say, how do we get out of being trapped? One of the things is to understand that other people feel trapped as well. How do we help one another? People are feeling lonely and isolated. The worse they feel, the more they withdraw. And so they're disconnected. And the only access they have is different television programs. They watch different channels. They are overwhelmed with traumatic news. They feel trapped. We've got schools, we've got places that we should make safe places for people to gather just to talk of how they feel. Safe spaces is what we need.
I want to ask Hanan an important question as a man. Is this a male problem? Because women often have great friendship groups. They can sit down with their friends and they can talk. It's much more difficult for a man to go to a man's friends to admit failure and admit the need for help. So are we seeing many of these issues specifically male related?
So when it comes to suicide, we know from the stats that women attempt more than men, but men are more successful because obviously their methods are more violent. Women are socialized to express their feelings, share their feelings. It's much more acceptable and socially appropriate. For men, you're seen as many adjectives. If you share your feelings, you're seen as unable to manage your life. You're seen as weak. And therefore, men are much more likely to not chat about how they feel. You know, the typical guy will go out and talk with a mate about the sport, or talk about with his friend about their financial life, their sense of purpose, the deal that they've just closed. But as opposed to social lack of connection or emotional difficulties. So men do struggle with sharing what's going on in their world. And it is important for men to be able to adapt and find the language to express themselves. I do want to say one thing, because I think it's important to mention that the whole concept of hope is a non-negotiable concept. I always excuse me, I always refer to Viktor Frankl, who watched families being led into the gas chambers himself, and he said, while watching them, he saw them singing and dancing, and he said, everything can be taken of a man except the last of all human freedoms, the freedom to choose one's own attitude. There are many things in the world that we cannot control, but one thing that we can is our attitude to any given situation. We can't control perhaps directly the political climate. We can't control, the water, the electricity. We can't control many things. We can't control stresses. That's life. I always say the moment you sign up to life, life is going to give you disappointment and hurt and rejection and grief, and that is life. But on the other side of the stress comes hope. But there's another side to hope that is very important that you can't let go of, and that is responsibility. We can talk about feelings, but at the end of the day, you can pick yourself up, and if you can't, you lean on somebody that will help you pick yourself up. But if you want the opposite of freedom is responsibility. If you want the freedom to get yourself from point A to point B, if you want the freedom of being mental health free, and that's not to say that we don't go through stress. That's life. It happens to everybody. We all feel at times that we are motivated and at times that we are demotivated. At times that we feel like it and times we don't. At times that we love life and at times that we question life. That happens to every single person on earth. It happens to you. It happens to me. But the successful among us are the ones that are able to grasp and hold on to hope and take responsibility for their lives. Note and highlight what is going on and do your best with the help of others if you need to go and fix it. So yes, to answer your question, do men struggle? For sure, and they have very different struggles, or there's some certainly similarities with different struggles to women, but in terms of the emotional expressions, for sure.
I think for men, it
Howard,
becomes
if I
even
can
more.
just jump on.
Okay, Tova, in a second, I'll come to you. I think men become even more difficult because they're no longer quite sure what sort of man they want to be. What is the role model that they're supposed to be following? Is it the dutiful husband? Is it the wage earner? Is it the Andrew Tate version of what men should be? And if you start identifying with the Andrew Tate version of what a man is, there's no room for anything else. And that just makes it even more difficult. Tova, your comments?
I don't know if, Hanan, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I think just with regards to, I wanted to just add on to what Hanan was so beautifully saying is that, there are so many things in our lives that we do not have any control over. We are often passive recipients of life unfolding around us, and there really is nothing that we can do to fix certain things. And I think that is what is so overwhelming, and that is what creates this hopelessness and this helplessness within us. And I love this concept of responsibility. And it's not about how do I fix it and how do I find solutions and how do I make this better. I'm wondering if perhaps it is about looking at our own individual lives and saying, what can I do? What tiny, small, achievable, doable action can I do today that is going to help me along that path of maneuvering in my mental health? I don't know if you remember that video that went viral during COVID of that kind of, I think he was a captain that spoke about making your bed. I don't know if you remember that, Howard.
Yeah,
but
no, he was an American
small...
military commander that said, every morning, the first thing you have to do is make your bed. And I think Nick refers to that in one of the articles written about him as a very important part of his healing. And we're going to hear from Nick in another minute or two.
Yeah, and I think that when it comes to our mental health, if we are able to just be honest with ourselves and say, well, I can't fix this. I can't, but I can make my bed in the morning, and I can call a friend who I know, as Brenda said, will really hear me, and I can, do something small and simple. I can drink my cup of coffee in the morning, and I can spend 10 seconds, and I can really, feel that beautiful, cup of coffee in the morning. And just those small little acts of mindfulness and things that we're doing just for ourselves, small acts of self-care, those, even though it's not going to fix the bigger problems, But all of those will eventually lead us to a place of better mental health. And that's the responsibility part, maybe that Hanan is possibly referring to, that we are never entirely trapped. There is always something that we can do, even if it is a tiny step in the right direction.
And Tove, isn't it true that maybe not all lives are perfect lives? They only look perfect from the
I don't know
outside.
any.
Exactly. Someone else's life is a perfect life, but no one lives a perfect life themselves.
Yeah.
Nick, I want to bring you in at this point in time because you really have a remarkable story to tell, and I'd love people to listen to your story. I've known you a while. I had no idea about your story, but I think if anything else, the practical examples and the story you tell about your life is in itself something that gives us hope of being able to get one's life together. Because for want of a better description, if I'm allowed to say so, you came from an incredibly messed up background.
Yeah, I did. And I just want to say again, thank you for this, Howard, because it's been a very stressful time for everyone. And I'd like to say for myself included, because we do, in a way, feel helpless in terms of trying to help others, because having been in a very dark place, you don't want other people to be there. And I think when you've experienced pain and trauma at a young age, you either decide to live your life wanting to help others or wanting to hurt others. So I'll give a little bit of my background. I'm adopted, and when I speak of my parents, I speak of my adopted mother and my adopted father. And my folks got divorced when I was quite young, and my adopted mom was not a bad person. She unfortunately, due to the times that she was living in, I don't think the healthcare system provided for the mental health issues that she had. And she turned to marijuana and to prescription pills. And that slowly eroded who she was. So the places that she put me in, that basically the abuse that I endured was not due to my mother being a bad person at all. It was her using slowly eroded who she was. And I started drinking when I was 9 years old, and it was at Pesach at the Cheerens in Cape Town. They were quite a well-known Cape Town family at the Claridge's Hotel, and we went over for Pesach, and sitting at the kids' table, I had wine for the first time, and I fell in love. I then drank all of my wine, and I started to try and steal the other kids' wine, and I was actually hiding the wine in my pea soup. So when people ask me, am I an alcoholic? I know that I'm an alcoholic, and that's my gift. And so prior to that, unfortunately, with my mother's drug usage, her decision making wasn't where it should be for a parent protecting a child. And she started to send me off to spend the evening with some of her gay male friends. I would assume they were also junkies as well. And they would keep me for the evening, and they would rape me. The first time that it happened, it was in an apartment building opposite the Century Hotel with the Ritz with a rotating restaurant on top. The first time that it happened, I managed to crawl out from under these two men. I was locked in a room with them. I was 6 years old. And I went to stand by the window because it was physically as far as I could get from them. Within this room, and I was looking out of this window. It was late, it was dark, and I thought to myself, and it was quite difficult to listen to everyone talking now because it brought back a lot of these feelings, so I'm just processing them. I didn't think I must speak to my dad, who was living in Johannesburg at the time. When my folks got divorced, we moved to Cape Town. I didn't think I should speak to a teacher. I didn't think I should speak to a friend's parents. I didn't think I should talk to someone. My first thought at the age of 6 was, what did I do that was so bad that would make my mom send me here? So I took on that responsibility. And as the abuse continued and it escalated, people at school, or my school friends, years later, when I started to speak about it, asked me, why didn't I talk to them? Why didn't I reach out for help? And I have 2 pieces of shame in my life that I'm grappling with still and working through. And the first one is, I went willingly to be abused because I thought if I did a good enough job, I could get my mother to like me. If I did a good enough job, I thought I could get her to actually love me. And that's why I didn't talk. And that behavior I took for my entire life. And I believed that I was a thing to be used by others for their pleasure or satisfaction. And I believed that the only relationships that I could get into were with people who hurt me so that I could try and stop them hurting me in order to try and get them to love me. Because unfortunately, my mom took her own life when she was 40. I was 15 and I was on holiday with my dad. And also prior to that, my stepfather, my mother had remarried, and when I was about 4 years old, my stepfather committed suicide, and I was there when he did it. So for me, I learned that from my stepdad, Errol, and my mom, that suicide is a viable option. It's an exit. And the things that were so difficult for me to listen to and to work through here was the understanding that there was shame. And that was why I had a family that loved me. My father was an incredible, incredible man. He was my best friend. And he supported me through everything. Even when my drinking got completely out of hand and I was causing chaos and disruption, he never kicked me out. He never turned his back on me. And I was breaking his heart. That the level of support I had was unbelievable. But the shame that I had for what I did to myself and how I behaved, and the fact that I didn't protect myself, and the shame that I had because my mom's actions taught me that I was a thing to be used. I had no value, I had no worth as a person. So I lived my life with no value and no worth. So when the drinking stopped working, as it does, I didn't find any other way out. I didn't know how to get out of where I was. And thinking about this talk today and sharing, a realization that came to me, because we've also had someone in the community that has taken his own life, and it's someone that I knew well, and it's broken my heart that he did. But I sat on my couch with my gun in my mouth, asking Hashem to give me the courage to kill myself. Because I didn't know, I couldn't carry on. I was in tremendous financial difficulty because I was selling insurance at the time. And my drinking, I was very successful in the beginning, and then the collapse came. And, you know, I stole money. I was living with my dad at the time. I stole money from my father, my beautiful father who loved me and supported me. And I told myself, you know what, as soon as I get paid, I'll pay that money back. My dad always kept an envelope with 1,000 rand in his cupboard. And I would go and sneak the money out of there to go drink without breaking that envelope. And that was the shame that I carried. And understanding it now I know that my dad would far rather have had me here than dead. And I didn't even think at the time, and this is something that's hit me quite hard now. I didn't even think at the time that if I'd shot myself, when he came back home, he would have found me. That wasn't even in my thought process. It wasn't, I need to go out, I need to go somewhere and plan it. It was just, I felt so heavy that I didn't know another way out. And I'm incredibly grateful that I didn't do that. And because, I mean, I get to be here and I get to work with addicts in recovery and I get to do incredible, wonderful things. And I had a chuckle when we were talking about social media. I'm posting pictures of my watch at 4 a.m. or 4:30 a.m., getting up in the morning, because for me, not something that I shared. That's important to me because that was usually the time that I was coming home. And I drank from the age of 9 until 36. 9, I remember my grandfather's 60th or 70th birthday, and I had 6 beers. I think I was 15 or 16 years old at his birthday, and then went home, went straight to the bar, and drank a bottle or half a bottle of brandy or whiskey or whatever it was. And I was so sick the next day. I was ill and I had to blame the dog. And it was my first hangover. And it was a horrendous hangover. And that didn't even stop me. Because for me, all I needed to do was chase oblivion. When I went out with my friends, we were in our late teens, early 20s. They went out to pick up girls. I went straight to the bar to drink because I couldn't deal with my reality. I couldn't deal with my pain. And what I realized was that we can be intelligent and we can be sophisticated, but I was feeling my pain as a 6-year-old little boy, as a 4-year-old little boy, and I lost my ability to think rationally. Now I can think as an adult and I can process that as an adult, but when I was there and asking God to help me kill myself, like, my life is a gift. I know that it's a gift. That's something that's very, very difficult for me to process and work with still. There's still shame around that. But the fact that I didn't, and the fact that I'm here, and the fact that I get to do what I do is my blessing. And I want to share something else as well. And I need to be careful with how I phrase this, because being raped taught me that I'm capable of surviving anything. So in being sober, twice I lost my business and I ended up being homeless. When I moved to Cape Town in insurance, I got wiped out financially and I stayed in my car. And then when my friend Ian Levitt found out, and I'd stayed with my dad for 2 weeks, and I was too ashamed to stay with him. And Ian found out and he gave me an apartment to stay in and rebuild my life. And when in Cape Town, I went from living in a beautiful apartment in Bantry Bay to renting a room in a house in Kayapul Road when it was dodgy. And after my divorce, I was heartbroken and I didn't have my head in the game and I wasn't invoicing my clients. And I got behind nearly 6 months in my rentals on my gym and on the flat that I was staying in. And I spoke to both landlords and I did a deal with them and I explained to them. And I moved into the back of my gym. I lived in my gym in Chestnut Hill Center. And there was no shower, there was no bathroom, there was a toilet, and I used the toilet in the center. And I bathed in a bucket with cold water and a face cloth while I could save money to rebuild. And I understand that it's very different for someone with a family. and being on my own makes things a lot easier. But understanding what I survived already meant that I was capable of surviving anything. And that's what got me through. And I needed to get sober to understand that I had what it took to get through. And that's what has been spoken about. I had the intellect, I had the understanding, I had the mental capacity and resources. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I didn't want to die. And that's what got me through, and what got me understanding that it's not that it doesn't matter what happens to me. It doesn't matter what happens, but I know what I've already survived. So I have the strength to survive whatever I need to survive. And for me, my life has been breaks, times of survival, and in between that has been times of thriving. And as I've gotten older, the thriving and the surviving have started to merge. And that's my biggest gift of sobriety and not drinking. I drank from 9 until 36. And I drank a lot, a fortune. It just, sorry, I've just lost my train of thought.
Nick, I would like to hear what was that moment, age 36, where you reckoned you could turn your life around? And tell us what your life has been like since then.
Perfect. So, it's what's been spoken about, someone willing to hear you. My MD and CEO, I worked for a company called Hereford Financial Services. And they called me in one day, and it was the silliest question ever asked of a human being, because I was 50 kilos heavier. I smelt like the back of a bottle straw. And they said to me, "Nick, do you have a drinking problem?" So I knew right then that my life was going to go one of two ways. If I said no, they most likely would have let me go, and I would have either drunk myself to death, killed myself in a car accident, or shot myself within 6 months. I genuinely believe that, because that's the low point that I was at. And I didn't want to die. So I said yes. And they asked me if I wanted help, and I said yes. And they put me in touch. This was on a Thursday. They put me in touch with Dan Wolf. I went to go and see Dan on the Friday. We sat down at 8 o'clock. We had a meeting for an hour. And at the end of the meeting, he says, "Nick, you're an alcoholic. You start the program on Monday." And I thought, just thank you. Okay, I understand this is what I am, and I have a way out. And that was the turning point. And from that point, it was the funniest thing, going to my first meeting on a Monday night at First Step, the outpatient center that they had, and finishing the meeting and going, "Oh, wait a minute, I can't go to the pub and drink now. I can't go to the Keg and Beagle in Linksfield and drink. I have to stop drinking. This is not about learning how to drink responsibly or manage my drinking. I have to stop." And I came home and I had nothing to do. And this has always been my challenge. When times are quiet, the darkness, the demons, those voices that want to tear me apart, that's when they come. And I need to fill my time with positive things. And that's really when I started with one push-up after watching a Charles Atlas documentary, and fell in love with the training and the exercise. And I had a good friend of mine, Dion Fransman, who kindly offered to train me again. And I spent 14 months training with him after work and rebuilding my body and my mind. And he said to me, "I've got 2 kids. And if I can mention them, I'd love Shlomi, Vigla, and Dean Unterslach." And he said that 75 Rand a week. And I started training them in the park at Dan Pinar Park, because I didn't have money for a gym. And I'd left insurance and come back to Johannesburg and started to rebuild and then build the gym from there. And we started doing corporates and expanding. And I built the business up to, we had probably 8 or 9 multinationals that we worked with. We had a lot of private clients. I had 5 development coaches. I set up a development academy to help develop young kids from disadvantaged communities, because for me, the single greatest thing that if I could offer is doing for others, it's service, without the expectation of anything back. Not putting myself in a position to be taken advantage of, but managing my output in terms of who I can help. And that's what's built my life. That's what fuels my soul. I can never have a bad day for two reasons. One, I'm above ground, so I have an opportunity to do things. When I was drinking, I had no control. So I have control. I can control as much as I can. And also service and just helping others is sort of what makes me happy. And I was just in Fochville yesterday, and two of my coaches finished they did their last provincial exams, and one of them is doing his national exam, and he's potentially going to go to the United States to coach one of the South African athletes. And we built up a media company, we built up a record company, and everything that came from that. And when COVID wiped us out, it took 70% of my business away in one day, because 70% of our business was corporate. I understood with what I had been through, and I went back to living on sweet potatoes and jungle oats for 8 months so that I could pay my guys, and I was able to pay them half of what they were earning before that. But that pain and that trauma made me understand that, okay, don't panic. Be an adult, be resourceful, be resilient, and do what has to be done. And again, I'll say this, it was just me. I didn't have a family then that I was responsible for. So it was much easier for me to go to rice and potatoes and jungle oats. Then just on a lighter note, I'm famous for posting some pretty horrible things on social media after that. Some terrible people don't think you should put peanut butter on hamburgers, but I do. And when cash flow started to improve and we could start to pick up, and from COVID happening, I built the studio because I had to bring online clients in, and we had trained clients internationally before that. I had a rule at the gym: overseas clients could train for a month for free. So as soon as COVID hit, I phoned them all up and I said, I know you're stuck at home, will you train with us? And we ended up training people in 15 different countries. And that's what got us through those dark times. But it was the understanding that what I had already survived gave me the strength, the capacity to survive what I had to. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I just knew that I had to do it. And if I can say something perhaps a little bit controversial, for myself personally, sure, I don't believe in hope. I believe in action. Because for me, when I was hoping for a way out of where I was, it ended up isolating me more and more from those who loved me and cared for me. When I'm sober and I'm challenged, then I take action. And action, I feel, empowers me. It enables me to reach out and to talk to other people when I have to. Hope was isolating for me. So I would rather have action than hope. Doing things to look after myself. How I get dressed in the morning. Taking time. Tova spoke about coffee. That's my number one priority. If I'm running late, I'm messaging a client, but I'm having my coffee. And how I look after myself for the day. So things right now are fantastic. The last 2 years were very, very challenging. Again, losing my dad and the business took big strain, and because my head wasn't in the game, but we got through it. And I think life is not easy. It's not about fun. It's not about happiness. It's about making it through the day and enjoying and valuing those moments of happiness. Guys, being gang raped in the Cape Flats, the thing that I take from that, the thing that I allow myself to believe, is my gratitude for the fact that I didn't end up in a shallow grave in a sand dune somewhere, because I could have very easily died, and that I get to be here with you. and I get to share this story, and I get to hope. I never in my wildest dreams would believe that I had the potential to add value to people's lives. And that's what I've made my purpose now.
Well, Nick, first of all, thank you. I think the amount of value that you've given to all of our lives by sharing the story, and I'm sure everyone watching us on all of the platforms this evening will give you a comment now about just, number one, your bravery to tell the story, but just the important lessons that you've shared with all of us. So would you describe your life as, at the moment, as having one of meaning and purpose? And tell us, you've recently actually won some competitions. You're a power lifter. You're a proper athlete now.
Yep. Yeah. So I'll say this. I would not change anything in my life because it's brought me here. I'm incredibly grateful for who I am and where I am and what I have. If I could just share a story, and then I'll talk about the powerlifting stuff, which was a lot of fun. I shared once at Houghton House, and it was probably about maybe even 10 years ago. And a guy came up to me afterwards, and he was a colored guy. He was a gangster, and he was big gold chain, covered in tattoos, huge guy. And he said to me, you know, and he looked like what my rapists look like. He said to me, what you spoke about, I did. I raped little boys, but it was done to me. And when I looked at him, I didn't see my rapist. I saw another little boy like me who had been raped. And that gave me the understanding to have empathy towards the people that had abused me, not because for any other reason than allowing myself to heal. Because what it taught me was I wasn't abused because I was bad. I was abused just because I was there. I was put there. They didn't understand the societal norms and rules, because you're talking about communities where you have 8 people sharing a bed, and when the boyfriend comes home or the husband comes home drunk and wants to have sex with the mother and she says no, he either does it anyway, and this is what the child is seeing, or the child gets raped. So it taught me that I was not bad. It wasn't me. It's other people's stuff that can affect us, has got nothing to do with us. It's got nothing to do with who we are. It's their stuff. It's how they see the world. And that was an incredible lesson. And the gifts that I get from sharing and from talking, I believe, are far more valuable for me than those hearing it. And I hope that everyone gets tremendous value. So on a lighter note, I was not the sporty kid at school, and recently now, about 4 weeks ago, my clients and coaches have been nagging me to start competing again. In 2015 or 2016, I won gold for South Africa in powerlifting in Morocco, and that was great. That was an incredible experience to go from a 20 draft a day drunk to winning gold. It's a very special experience to have your country's flag over your shoulders and a gold medal around your neck. And I had 4 days to train. I qualified for a provincial championships, and at the provincial championships, I qualified for national championships, which we had last weekend in Port Elizabeth, and I won gold for my division. And I qualified to represent South Africa for this coming year locally, not internationally. But what's great is we have 4 international powerlifting competitions in South Africa this year, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So that was very special. Not bad for a 52-year-old fart. So the hardest part,
Nick,
how it was cutting the weights. Well,
Nick, I'm
Yeah.
going to open it in a second to all of our panelists and to all of the questions that we're going to do, because the story is so remarkable and there's so many lessons to take from it. So please join us in this conversation that we have. But the one question before I hand over to our panelist is, it sounds like it's incredibly brave to tell the story. Is it hard for you to tell the story?
So this has been the hardest for me to talk about since the first time. And I think I'm going to spend the next couple of days, weeks unpacking why. I think it was just what was discussed leading up to this. And it's never easy. It's draining. You know, I spoke to my coaches a couple of hours ago and I said, guys, I'm not coming in tomorrow morning. You've got the morning sessions, please. I need to rest because I understand I need to take that break. It's very tough, but I didn't choose my trauma. I didn't choose my pain, but I can damn sure choose what I do with it. I didn't have the strength to stop what happened as a child, but I know I can have the strength to do what I want to do with this pain. And that's to share and to talk so that people understand that they're not alone in their pain and they're not alone in their trauma. And what happened to so many of us had nothing to do with who we are and what our value is. It's other people's stuff. People treat us based on the way that people treat us is based on what they have gone through, how they see the world and their value systems. Because we do that to everyone else. If you've suffered pain and you don't want anyone to hurt, that's how you'll live your life. If you want to return the pain because you feel it's the only way that you can heal, that's how you live your life. But it's not an indicator or reflection on me or on anyone, the way that they are treated.
Brenda, if I can turn to you to comment on what you've heard from Nicholas this evening. And one of the things that struck me is even when he spoke about his alcoholism, he spoke about it as a blessing, not as a curse. What did you think of that?
Wow. Howard, I don't believe there is anybody on this forum that would not be deeply moved by, Nick, your story and your experience and your willingness to there was an authenticity about what you were describing. This wasn't something that was just happening outside of yourself, but a very authentic description of self. And you know, I sit with an inordinate sense of being moved by what has happened. What I also sense is that there are things about your life, Nick, that cannot, when you use the word alcohol can be a gift. Nothing in the world is binary. There is nothing that is all good or all bad. Everything has its alternate quality, and it's for us to be able to recognize it. It was through alcohol that you made certain discoveries, but you also made certain connections. And you spoke so very powerfully, Nick, about the people that journeyed with you. You spoke about friends that you called who were able to not only recognize the value of a person like you, who they wanted to assist, whether it was an Ian Levitt, whether it was your employers who said to you, are you an alcoholic? And we're on board with you. There were people that were willing to stand by you and allow you to find a way in the world. And as Hanan would have said, in some way, to take responsibility for yourself, that you would not to be able to respond to the things that were happening to you. And if I could, Nick, just say, when you use the word hope is not helpful for you, it is an action. And you say something so significant. Concepts are doing things. Hope is a doing thing. Loving is a doing thing. When I say I love you, for you to be loved, you have to feel loved. It's a doing thing, and an action is doing hope, and you do hope. You also seem to have a quality that simply is said, I will not be defeated. Unfortunately, not everybody has such a quality, but it's a quality of I will not be defeated. I will not let what is happening to me defeat me. And you'd said something so important, Hanan had noted earlier, about hope and responsibility. Hope is faith of an imagined future, something that we can imagine. beyond what is happening at this moment. And if we can have hope and faith that partner each other and imagine a future different to the one that we have, we are in the process of doing hope. For myself, I just want to applaud you, honor you for being able to say each day, I choose to be here. You make a choice on each day. When you do feel the pain, when you do feel the shame, you do something with it. You do not just simply embrace it and buckle. And that comes with, I refuse to be defeated. What you've managed to achieve, people without your history haven't often not managed to achieve. So maybe the gift is because of what has happened to you, you have taken in a position to literally be victorious and triumph over that. And I'm left deeply with a sense of hope, if I may, of imagined future for others, where they can consider the possibility that they could live a different life. But that doesn't come easily. And so for anyone who is listening and imagine for one moment that what you're describing was easy, I would like to suggest to them that each day you make that decision, each day, each moment of each day when things happen, you don't just sit with it, you make a decision to act in accordance with what is happening to you. And so I say with a deep regard, just may you be blessed for all the effort that you have put in order to be the person that you prefer to be. Thank you, Nick.
Hanan, I want to speak about the fact that Nick was in a position where he could have spoken. He could have called his father, but he didn't. He could have spoken to his friends or his friends' parents, but he didn't. And ultimately, I think that's a very common thing, that often people around those in trouble don't understand or don't know that the person is in trouble. Are there signs for us to look out for? What do we do if we think someone could be in trouble? What should we be looking for to try and be proactive amongst our friends and our family?
There are a couple of things that you must and you should be able to see in others that should sound the alarm. But I just want to mention just three things that Nick has said that I think are very powerful. The first thing that he said that I picked up, that he didn't want to die, and that's true to the human spirit. The human spirit doesn't want to die. When somebody commits suicide, it's because they don't see any way out. They feel stuck. They don't see any other solution. The pain is overwhelming and they need a relief, and the only relief is the ending one's life. But the true human spirit does not want to die. That is true for every human being. We fall, we get up, we trip, we learn, we adapt, but we want to move forward. The other thing that he said that was very powerful is that he said he was busy with productive things. He didn't allow himself to stay in his own head, because the truth is we are our own worst enemies. The moment we get into our heads, we are going to be creating monsters. It's very challenging to get into our own heads and create beautiful things, especially when you're in pain. And perhaps as an analogy, if you have a headache, that's a 12 out of 10. Getting into your own head, your head is just going to create monster after monster after monster. Sure, if you're not triggered, that life is beautiful and everything works out, then it's very easy to get into your head and create beautiful, creative things. But when we're in emotional pain, to get into your own head is the worst thing you can do, and you want to always be external. The more external you are, the less internal you are. And external, I mean by doing small things that are achievable for you. So as we discussed earlier, from doing your own bed to finding meaningful pursuits with your partner, with your kids, to going for a walk in the garden, and ultimately bigger achievements from your sense of purpose to financial stability and fixing the things in your life. And thirdly, the thing that he mentioned is he said to himself, don't panic, be an adult and do what needs to be done. And I go back to what I said earlier, which is he took responsibility. He didn't allow himself to sit in this dark place in his head. He didn't allow himself to sit with the emotions and feel sorry for himself. He knew that it wasn't okay, but he was going to make it okay. He became an adult and he took responsibility. And to his point, hope and doing, the truth is hope without the doing is just wishful thinking. You want to be doing, you want to be busy, you want to create, you want to achieve, you want to find your purpose. but you want to at the same time know that it can be okay and it will be okay. But your question, what do we pick up in other people? The moment you see that somebody's acting differently to what they normally act outside of their norm, they are overly or excessively upset, feeling down, feeling low, they started to withdraw from the world. Perhaps something significant has affected them, from a loss of a job to financial instability. They're starting to speak in ways that you find, this is weird, this is not the person that I know. My advice to you is rather lose the friendship than lose the friend. In other words, confronting them and offering to help and surrounding them with love and care and giving them advice and getting them from point A to point B and out of the darkness. You might lose a friendship because they might see it as, well, you are labeling me, or perhaps I don't need this kind of help, or they might perceive you as seeing them as weak, but at least you might actually save their lives. It's okay to reach out to the people that love you in order to get help. And if you see somebody that is struggling, is acting differently, feeling differently to the norm, you reach out to them and you speak up, just like Nick bosses have confronted him with his alcoholism. That was the moment that changed his life. I commend you, and I implore everybody to go and reach out to the people that you think might be struggling with kindness and love, because you might be saving their lives.
So
Can I say something on that?
Sure, of course, Nick. Please
Sorry.
come in.
Thank you. Just, and just also on the previous point, I was so angry about what happened to me. I made sure that I would move forward as an adult. But to talk about the point of reaching out and speaking to someone, if Michael and Glenn hadn't had that meeting with me, and if they had just decided to let me go, which they had every right to do, I wouldn't be here today. Their calling me in and sitting me down saved my life.
Tova, I'm going to ask you for a very brief comment about what the lessons that you take out of Nick, and then I'm going to come back to the panel, because I think there's some very practical things we need out of our professionals on this panel about where people turn to. Numbers for people to call, organizations for people to go to. Where do you go for help? There are people in the Q&A section and on the comment section who actually have reached out asking for help, but they're not quite sure where to go to. So as soon as Tova has given us some comments on the story that Nick has told us, this remarkable story of survival, I'd like to come back to our panelists to say, practically, not theory, practically, this is the number you dial, this is the person you go to, this is how you ask for help, because I think sometimes how to ask for help is even harder than asking for help itself. So Tova, please, the lessons you've drawn from Nick, and then we're going to come back with some practical solutions, please.
Thanks, Howard. I'll be very brief. Nick, you know that you absolutely blow me away every time we have a conversation, and tonight was no different, so thank you. I think for me, the two things that stood out were, as you just mentioned, Nick, those two guys who sat you down and said, do you think you have a drinking problem? That for me is something that we all need to take cognizance of and say to ourselves, would I have the courage to take a friend's hand and say to him or her, do you have a problem? And I think that we are often so scared. And as you said, we might lose a friend or we might come across in a bad way. And, maybe they really are fine. But that was the turning point. And if we as just normal citizens could see that we have the ability to be the turning point in somebody's life, we need to be brave enough to do that. And we hope that they will have the courage that you had, Nick, to say, yes, I do. Because that was the beginning of the beginning for you. And I think the other thing that I took away from it is that when we believe that life has got more to offer us than what we are living now, that is hope. That for me is what hope is. If I know that this is not all there is something else out there that I could possibly reach if I had the right people in my life or the right resources in my life, knowing that can give you the courage and the strength to take the steps forward that is necessary. So thank you, Nick.
So, Brenda, I want to start with you. How do we ask for help, and who do we ask?
Look, just apropos of what has just been said, the idea that, Nick, you were able to be vulnerable. Sometimes it's about being vulnerable as opposed to being courageous, taking your pain and being vulnerable in front of someone else and telling them where it hurts. It does take courage, but we have to be willing to be vulnerable. But in respect to where do we go, who do we reach to, whether it's a friend, whether it's a rabbi, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a doctor, there are therapists. The problem is with therapists is sometimes people don't have medical aid and they don't have funds. And so there is keys, but I represent or not represent, I would recommend. The Chev has helplines. People often find if they haven't responded, call again, call again. The numbers, I don't know if you have them there, Howard. The Chev everyday line is 011532.
Hold on. Let's go slowly, because I want to actually write this down on the chat. In fact, Dylan, I think, has just done that. Is it 0115329701? Is that the number?
And then there is a helpline, and that is open in the after hours, and that's 082
449 101. No. Okay. So okay, let's do this properly. Chev helpline, and this is the number to dial: 082
499
499
1010.
Okay. 082 499 1010, and that's open 24 hours a day.
That is a helpline. The other 532 number is open during the day. When that closes, the helpline kicks in. And we've got places like Tova. We've also got, I know that Hatzola offers a helpline. And sometimes, if we could, linking on a little bit with what Hanan is saying, if you can't call, ask a friend to call on your behalf. Ask a friend if a friend is worried about someone. There is only, people are often worried. Professionals are concerned about confidentiality. Are we enabled to break confidentiality of the people who speak to us? There are two occasions on which we as professionals who are registered can break confidentiality: when somebody's life is in danger, or when they are going to put somebody else's life in danger. In other words, they're threatening the life of someone else. We are compelled to report. Not compelled to report. We can seek assistance for them. And if it were ever to come to court, and if we were ever reported, we would be on safe ground. Tell somebody who will seek help. If you're concerned about someone who is showing signs of being vulnerable, of not managing, that their lives, their personalities, their characters are altered, they're doing things that is atypical, that they don't ordinarily do, making amends, saying sorry, giving away their things, talking about, well, life doesn't have any meaning, even threatening. Young children do. Young children say, well, if I don't get this, I'll kill myself. How real is the consequence? Sometimes children threaten things to punish. And I do say, for all of us, please be aware the consequences, the debris that are left behind after suicide are significant. They are the ripple effect can last for generations. To be aware that we can just put out, as Tova, you were saying, just be there to put out a hand to help a soul, so that if you see something, say something. Whether it's to a teacher, whether it's to a doctor, to a rabbi, to the Chev, people have places where they choose to go, where they don't choose to go. We need to know where it's safe, and we need to risk being vulnerable. If we listen not mostly, to some of the threads that Nick was pulling out, he was willing to be vulnerable, to tell people he was struggling, and people were able to put out a hand and to offer him something that made sense. And he was able to take it. He is extraordinary. He's done so much work on his world, in his life, on his experience. Not everybody is able to do that. So those are the putting out the hands to be heard.
So I think we say to people, if you feel trapped without solutions, if you're feeling isolated and lonely, if you're feeling like you're under pressure and you don't have an escape valve, if you're feeling under financial pressure and you don't know how to get out, that's the time you either call the Gev number or you walk over to your spouse or one of your children and say, I'm feeling a little vulnerable, make a call for me.
I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble.
Or you go to your GP, or you go to your rabbi, or you go to one of your friends and say, I'm in trouble, just call the Gev and get them to help.
And having a warm cup of tea is not going to help this.
Yeah. Tova, there are people who want therapy but often can't afford therapy. And that's where the key comes into play. Tell us who should be using it and how do we get hold of it?
Okay, so I did mention a little bit about the key at the beginning, but we are an organization that is there to help people, the middle class of our community, where you might be on medical aid, but it might just be a hospital plan, and then therapy is just not a possibility for you or your family, or you might have a certain amount of medical aid that then eventually, after a couple of months runs out, and then you're already on the back foot. So this is for people who are able to pay a little bit. We charge 400 Rand a session, and then we pay the therapists the shortfall. And we really have incredible therapists, and we are here to help. And please give us a call, and we will set up an intake with you and allocate you one of our incredible therapists. And should I read out the number?
In fact, we've put it on 065 533 4442.
Great.
It's on the chat, and Dylan is posting it on all our social media platforms as well.
Fabulous. And if I can just mention one other thing as well, and that is the Hatsola Connect. And I don't know if that's been mentioned. Hatsola Connect is an anonymous teen chat line that is run by Hatsola. It is specifically geared for teenagers. You go onto the Hatsola website and you tap the little icon, and it'll take you straight to an incredibly trained. That we've got amazing people that are trained in this forum to help any teenager that is struggling. It's completely anonymous, and it is also 24 hours a day, including Shabbos, and it is being used all the time, and it really is a very, very worthwhile assist if somebody needs help.
In fact, what I'm going to ask Dylan to do is I'm going to ask him to consolidate all of these numbers together and to send them out to everyone who's registered for tonight's webinar, and also post them on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Zoom. Hanan, we're going to in a moment go to Nicholas Engel for the last word of the lessons that he wants to share. We've been on quite a journey tonight, but help is there and hope is there, and hope is an action. I think we've learned tonight. What other lessons can we learn to build resilience within ourselves?
So people think resilience is your willingness to overcome a particular situation, a particular conflict, or a particular issue in your life. And it's not true. Resilience is all about, do I have a framework that's more robust than a stressor? Do I have the tools? Do I have the skills? Do I have the blueprint, the method, the system that will help me overcome and get from point A to point B? Nothing creates hope more than moving forward, feeling that you're achieving a particular set of goals. Nothing makes you feel more of a dopamine rush than when you're seeing yourself reaching your vision, your dream. So for me, being stuck is synonymous with suffering, and just don't allow yourself to be stuck. The work that the Key is doing is unbelievable. I've met some of the counselors. They are absolutely the best in the field, and you should reach out. Hatsola, the Chev, do unbelievable work. We have amazing community that sticks together, especially at this time when we need it most. The Jewish spirit is about coming together, especially when things are happening. And now, especially at this time when there's so much going on that should split us, this is when we come together. So there is help, there is hope. Never feel stuck, never feel that there's no option. And I will say this, just because you don't know that a solution or what the solution is, it doesn't mean that a solution does not exist. Just because you don't know what the solution is, it doesn't mean that solution doesn't exist. You might look for it, you might ask for it, you must search for it, but keep on moving forward. Be external until you find the answer. Hope is there. Never lose hope with, in addition to the doing, to the behavior, but never allow yourself to be stuck knowing that everything is going to be okay.
Nick, you told us the story of sitting on your couch with a gun in your mouth and you chose life. Give us the lessons that when you speak to schools, when you speak to adults, when you speak to groups, give us the lessons that you share with them over why they should choose life too.
So I think if I can start by saying that, you know, I still get suicidal thoughts. And when things are stressful, when things are difficult, my mind defaults to, where's my gun? When I was in Cape Town and I was having tremendous financial difficulties, I was so stressed, my nervous system shut down, I developed shingles. My default would be, okay, I'm going to go up Table Mountain and jump off Table Mountain. But what I understand is that these are just thoughts. I don't have to act on them. My thoughts and my feelings have no consequences for me. I can think and feel whatever I want, but if it's my words and my actions that have the consequences. And the biggest thing that I've seen, particularly in the work that I do with the addicts at Houghton House, go through twice a week and we train them. They say torture, I say train. I get to spend time with people in early recovery and see the struggles. And what I've realized is we are far more valuable than what we believe. And the person that we desperately want to be is not as valuable to those who love us and care about us and don't even know us, but are in this incredible community. You know, the shame and what I learned from this webinar is what got me to nearly kill myself was my shame. What stopped me asking for help was my shame. I didn't believe that I deserved anything from anyone because I didn't believe I was anything, or I didn't believe I had any value. And I had no worth or value, or what. The world wouldn't be any less without me. It probably would be better off. That's what I believed. And I know this to be so untrue, that every single person in this world, in our incredible community, we need everyone here. Everyone is needed. And that's why it is so important just to ask for help. The person that I wanted to be so badly, I placed more value on that person than I did on myself. But what I realized afterwards is that who I was more valuable to those around me who cared about me or even knew me than the person that I wanted to be. And I think that was my shame nearly getting me to end my own life. And again, the pain that we've been through, the trauma that we've been through, has given us the strength to get through what we need to get through. And the proof is, if I made it through today, I have no excuse for not making it through tomorrow. You know, it's a simple thing. I've got to wake up in the morning, I've got to deal with my day, and I've got to put my head on the pillow. And as you said, I fight every single day for my sobriety. I fight every single day for my sanity. I fight every single day to be an adult. And that's it. We have to fight. Life is a fight. For me, I know I'm in trouble the moment I take my foot off the gas and start to coast. So we have to fight because we're worth it. And the truth is, anyone out there who is contemplating taking their own lives, we deserve to have you in our world. So please stay. until the help that you can get can start to have an effect on your life.
I feel like I have to quote from the Bible, because it says, I call upon heaven and earth to record this day against you that I've set before you the choice between life and death, the choice of blessings and cursings, and therefore choose life. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us this evening. It's been such a remarkable evening of storytelling. There are people who've reached out on the chat and the Q&A, and I plead with you, please call those numbers that we've put on the screen. That's really important that you reach out again if you believe that you haven't been dealt with appropriately. Please, I beg you, just take one last chance to do it again. We've put those numbers up on the screen. But thank you to everyone who's joined us this evening. Thank you to a remarkable panel of professionals. It's been such an honor to have you. And most importantly, Nick, when you read through the comments that I'll send you this evening of what people have said about you and the inspiration that you have brought to their lives, you will realize what a true value and a gift you are to all of us.
Thank you, Howard.
We'll see you again on Thursday evening. Do not forget, Douglas Murray is one of the most intelligent, eloquent, and controversial figures of our generation, a huge supporter of Israel and the Jewish people. And to have him on the couch with Howard Feldman on Thursday evening is truly going to make magic. Thank you. We'll see you all then. Good night, everyone.
Good night, guys. Thank you.